Traición, papá. Tenemos a Tesla en el team. Quinta distinta, un pitagórico neoplatónico. Ayan, ay, tal man, alkaline, so vital. Whole food, plant-based, high carb, high road, Christ, like, Buddha, himself, vegan type shit, like Shaolins, Da Vinci y Djokovic, como Turo, Sócrates y los de Nazaret,
Why should someone today who's maybe isn't a vegetarian or doesn't care about Christianity or doesn't care about, animal sacrifice, why should they be interested in something like Christspiracy? And maybe why is it relevant today? Why should we really care about it? Why is it urgent? Because I think it is urgent.
There's so many reasons why it is, and I know where we're going with it, so I'll try to on-ramp us there by saying
Sure.
that whether you are vegan, vegetarian, care about eating meat or not, whether you're Christian, atheist, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, the fact of the matter is the Temple of Jerusalem is essentially the Death Star of planet Earth. So if you think of the Star Wars universe, you've got the Rebel Alliance and you've got the Imperial Order, and it's all centered around the Death Star. And so whether you subscribe to Jesus as a myth, Jesus as a historical person, we could argue about that all day. I know where I stand on that. Everybody's got their opinions. You can't argue with the fact that there was a Nazarene movement, that there was a historical movement. Just set aside the man of Jesus for a second. That's the Rebel Alliance. Okay. The Imperial analogy from Star Wars is the Sanhedrin and the Pharisaical system of Judaism at the time, in bed with King Herod in Rome, and then essentially Emperor Palpatine and all that is Rome. And so, and then the Death Star is the temple. Okay. And so you've got this crew of Rebel Alliance that goes in and throws down on the Death Star, just like they did in Star Wars. And it's one of the most significant events in history, because everything that we feel is like evil or wrong with the world on so many levels, pick the rabbit hole, pick the red pill, pick the truther path, whichever way you want to go down it. I promise you, if you go down it far enough, it goes back to the animal sacrificial bloodletting system.
Right.
So
totally.
That's why it's important to everyone.
100%. And that kind of goes back to the other point about blood sacrifice being such an uncomfortable topic for a lot of Christians, because I think many don't realize their type of Christianity has kind of been reformatted to allow for animal sacrifice, whereas I think authentic Christianity is averse to animal sacrifice. And what I mean by that is you've got a lot of Christians today who are kind of anticipating the reconstruction of the temple in Jerusalem, right? And this is to add to kind of what you said, I'd say why people should care about this is Israel, Palestine, Zionism as a whole. All of this is directed towards the re-implementation of the sacrificial system in Jerusalem at the temple. And they're doing that right now. How many wars are going to be fought in the Middle East over Zionism? The Messiah that's being awaited in Jerusalem is probably not the Messiah the Christians want to show up again, right? And like I said, Zionism as a whole, the reason they want that land is specifically for the temple,
right?
In the in the opinions of many.
Well, it's on Mount Zion. I think that people don't realize that literally Zion it's the holy city, but really it's the Temple Mount. Like a lot of times when scripture's referencing the holy mountain, that's Zion, and it's meant to be the mountain that the temple sits on.
If you guys are out there and you're interested in things like Freemasonry or exposing Freemasonry, or being suspicious of kind of world domination plots, right? Well, this is very relevant to that too. Freemasonry is essentially a hermetic order that is built around the idea of legitimizing a 3D real Temple of Solomon. Freemasonry is essentially, what do they call it? The temple craft, right? It's all about architecture, stone masonry, the jargon of stonemasons being used as metaphors for self-improvement, right? And things like that, but also occult studies, right? That's what happens at Freemasonic lodges. Right. So not many people think about the fact that it's all having to do with Solomon. Freemasons believe they trace their organization all the way back to Solomon, who built the first temple, which is where all these animal sacrifices were then implemented. And they happened with a couple disturbances, right? A couple gaps here and there, all the way up until the time of Jesus, when they're halted for at least a whole day, right? May have even crashed the economy in that part of Rome because of the temple system being paused for a whole day. Mm-hmm. Now, Freemasonry serves on the world stage to legitimize the concept of building a new temple. It's the logical conclusion of so much of their kind of mythology and terminology, is that if you're talking about this temple all day, aren't you going to be in support of it actually being built when the time comes? I think that's one of the big aims of Freemasonry. The fact that Freemasonry originated in northern, the British Isles. Israel used England, Britain, to, get themselves the Holy Land, to capture the Holy Land, to carve out, the Holy Land and fuel the Zionist movement. So Zionism movement largely also headquartered in England, in the UK, and Freemasonry comes out of there. So there's a lot more to be said about Freemasonry, but if you care about that stuff, just try and kind of see how that may also lead to this temple. For those who don't know, Israel wants to rebuild the third temple so that they can resume animal sacrifices to welcome their Messiah, who is not Jesus, but they have convinced many Christians in America especially that this somehow Messiah, who they didn't believe in the first time, will be the Messiah that all the Christians believe in this time around, Yeah. Many would say that this Messiah they're waiting for is actually the Antichrist. So there you go. That's an overview of kind of how this leads into the geopolitics of today. This is the core issue of the Zionism conflict in Israel and Palestine. So they talk about some of the accounts of how deep the blood was. They actually say up to the ankles or up to the knee. Yeah. The blood was pooling so high in some areas. Yeah. That's terrifying. I mean, people never think about carnage on that scale, even when they're looking at the Old Testament in the most critical light, saying, oh, God commanded these people to kill those people, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Yeah. But they really gloss over how barbaric this environment that Jesus was stepping into was. And again, this is going to tie into what's happening today is, even if you're a flesh eater, we're not talking about bow and arrow out in the woods, you and your quarry, right? Yeah. People talk about hunters being a more righteous form of getting meat. That's a total universe from senseless, sin-based animal sacrifice, basically saying humans sinned, therefore these animals must pay for it. Now, this also kind of begs the question, Cam, and I know it's talked about a lot in your documentary, but how did we even get into animal sacrifice? Like, why is that even a thing by the time Jesus comes around? And did God ever even intend it? Do your best to kind of tackle that.
Yeah. So to wrap that up, I was able to go there. It's in the movie Christspiracy. Definitely watch it. You can see where essentially I was going to investigate and see how this temple could even operate like that with all of that blood. There would have to be, these drainage systems, which I actually found were called shishin. It's this ancient name for the holes at the bottom of the altar where it would drain to the underworld. But it was also said to eventually hit gutters and go down to the Kidron Brook or the Valley of Hinnom, which is Gehenna, which is where Jesus is talking about when he says hell. Like most people don't realize when he says talking about hell, he's pointing or talking to Gehenna, which is the Valley of Hinnom, which is where all the blood and the bones and everything flow from the animals. But anyhow, I was walking through this new excavation that I was able to get to at the Temple Mount. And here I am looking to try to see if I can figure out through this chart that I was following where those drainage holes would be. And, I'm thinking a little gutter, a little hole. And then the next thing I know, I see a sign and some markings and talk to someone and realize I'm actually walking through the hole.
Right.
It's that big. It's so huge for the gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of water. So that's
blood. Gallons of water or gallons of blood?
Sorry, gallons of blood. There probably was water that went through it too when they had to wash it out and everything as well. But no, for gallons of blood, it went right under the main street where people walked up. So anyhow, to your question, how did it get there? So you've got the story beginning in Genesis at the creation of the world in this beautiful paradise, paradiso. We can talk about that. I know you've got some points on that etymology there, but you've got this paradise where humans and animals are all living in harmony. Genesis 1:29 specifically states after the command for dominion over the animals that humans have a diet that consists only of fruits of trees and herbs bearing seed, etc. And the animals even have a herb-based diet or a plant-based diet, meaning no predation of animals eating other animals. So this is this paradise that the original world was created in their creation story. And then from there, you move into, after the fall and sin enters the world and everything, you move into this digression where slowly but surely you start to see this animal sacrificial ritual come into play. And without getting lost too in the weeds, this is something you and I have been talking about a lot, Connor, is that even in our own canonical text, there's
who's that? Who are you talking about?
Oh,
who's that?
Doctor.
Thank you.
The reason why this is so important for people today, whether you ascribe to any of this stuff or not, is that the temple is the model for the first slaughterhouse system. Before temples of any religion, because it's not just even Judaism that had a temple animal sacrificial ritual. This is ancient Mesopotamia. This is in India and the East with like the Brahmins fell into this, the whole thing. These temples are the model for mass producing animal flesh for cities. Okay, for urban centers. Before that, the only animal killing was very nomadic, very scarce, or it was hunting, which is really, resource intensive from the sense of like, you got to go out and spend days and your energy and you may not even get a kill or whatever. So this is this new form of industrialized animal killing at mass scale, like you mentioned. So by the time of Jesus, we've got the temple slaughterhouse, and he's grown up with these prophets, Jeremiah, Isaiah, that he's quoting all throughout the scripture, who are at war in a way with the priests over this issue. And most people don't see it. And there's a lot of historical record that we have of the Nazarenes, Jesus the Nazarene, and their particular stance against this. And so we can get into all that, but that's the scene that's set in the first century when Jesus is in the Nazarenes are walking the earth, is that there's this massive Death Star of blood and chaos that's right at the center of what's supposed to be God's religion. And they just don't see it that way.
Totally. And I like what you said about this kind of being the blueprints for the meat industry almost, or getting most people hooked on the daily consumption of flesh.
100%.
Yeah, about how integral that was to some religious movements. You had the temple system in Athens, for example. They would be sacrificing animals and be selling it off to the lower caste, the lower, more impoverished people were the only ones who could stomach flesh like that,
Yeah.
on a daily diet, because it was being discarded. It's like if you ever watch The Lion or the Tiger King, how he feeds his whole zoo with discarded meat from all the grocery stores and stuff. It's the bottom of the barrel. You would think 20-year-old grains would be the bottom of the barrel of poverty food. Oftentimes it's flesh and old flesh and things that have been dead for a long time. That's what I wanted to get into. That's my next question, is the thing I want everyone to know about your documentary. The thing I want you to explain to people a lot more is, I don't know how I got off track just a sec there, but you pointed out to me, not directly, but you're the first person I heard it from ever. Feel free to give credit, wherever you think it's due, but I heard it from you first, that humans learned, let's say it like this: most people in kind of this truther community are against the RFID chip push. They're against the digital ID. They're against the AI surveillance. They're against the forced vaccinations. They're against the contact tracing. They're against the you name it, you name it, you name it. You name it.
Yeah.
They're all against that. But when it comes to animals, they don't bat an eye. In fact, a lot of those same nationalistic, farmers who are kind of leading the fight against big institutions, sometimes they're guilty of this same stuff. You pointed out to me how, as humans, we almost deserve the same treatment. Not going to, maybe that's a strong way to put it, but you could make the case that we have earned that treatment by ingesting that type of food. That's how we treat our animals. RFID chip them, force impregnation, abortion. You know how many people won't bat an eye at abortion in humans, but then they'll abort their cows or this or that, or they'll play God in another way and force impregnate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the double standard the hypocrisy is astounding.
Yeah.
So just kind of on that whole topic, there's so much to say about it. How did you kind of put that together? And please do a better job than me in kind of fleshing that out. Like, how does that dynamic work? And just real quick,
Mm-hmm.
we've all heard things like, so long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. This is kind of that same principle, right?
Yeah, I believe that's Leo Tolstoy, one of the great philosophers, that said that one. Pythagoras said something similar, and so did Da Vinci. So it's really a great example of, Jesus's ultimate tenet, but the kind of flip side version, which is the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or as it's said in Matthew, do not do unto others as you do not want done to you. And we really have this boomerang effect, if you will, of our actions coming back to us with the RFID chips, chipping, tracking, tracing, confining, vaccinating, forced death, forced birth, everything pre-planned, cloning, what else? Genetic modification, transhumanism, all the things that we're alarmed about in this kind of whole sphere of top tier, top down government control. What is the government trying to do to us in these scenarios? They're trying to control the herd. Listen to that word, the herd. I mean, we heard it all the time during the COVID situation, herd immunity, right? And why is that? Well, let's just stick with that example to start off with. Inoculations, vaccinations, they all began with livestock. In fact, the word vaccine comes from the Latin root vacca, which means cow. Okay. That's the Latin word for cow. Why?
Hang on. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. So the word vaccine comes from the Latin root vacca, which means cow in Latin. And the reason why is because cows were the first recipients of the first vaccines during the cowpox epidemic, where essentially cells from sick cows were injected into well cows to try to build herd immunity. And from that system, the pharmacia, the pharmacy, the pharmaceuticals, the industry that we've dealt with through these situations now, regardless of what you believe pro or against, the fact remains that they were developed on livestock. And in fact, all of the quote unquote epidemics, pandemics, however you want to label them, in some way, shape, or form, root back to livestock based illness. And, you know, a lot of them are called zoonotic diseases. Actually, you maybe have heard that because they come from animal based systems. You've got swine flu, you've got bird flu, you know, influenza. That the list, you go down the line and all of it traces back to some form of animal livestock husbandry. And the reason why is because when you confine animals all in these spaces and they're all mixing with each other's feces and other types of bodily fluids and stressed and confined and everything, it breeds a certain kind of disease. Now in our day, we've got 90 billion land animals killed every year for food consumption alone. And that's not even including fishes. If you include fishes that we catch from the ocean and farming and everything, you're talking countless trillions. It's not even countable. But even 90 billion is a large number. It's hard to fathom. So just to put it into perspective, that's like killing the entire human population every single year 10 times over. So that's how many animals are in this agriculture system. And 99% of those 90 billion are in factory farms. All of this is verifiable. You can Google it right now. Now, what does that mean? That means that all of those beings are chipped, tracked, traced. I mean, you got a picture there. You can see we know the number on the ear. That's enough to know that they're just a commodity, a number. But it's gone so far as that they actually are chipped and tracked. I mean, this is a real thing. It's like how they do with pets now, so that you can keep track of them if you're a pet owner. But they all have it so they can like optimize the herd, learn from their biometric data. That's another one. You know, the biometric data of how health reports are going to be. You know, if people get chipped and everything. They're doing all that on livestock already, and they're vaccinating them. They're pumping them full of hormones. They're genetically modifying them. They're force confining them, which we know happened to us in reverse through the whole COVID scenario and the lockdowns and all of that. So bottom line, you know, we could go on for a long time about it. The analogies are endless, but it's essentially a boomerang effect. I mean, once you go down and you really look at it, it's undeniable that it's essentially we are experiencing the blowback effect of our own actions towards billions and billions of sentient creatures.
Now, vaccinate comes from vacca, from cow.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that crazy how no one talks about that?
Crazy.
Vacca vaccine.
Oh, were you pulling up a mic drop earlier? Is that what you were trying to do?
A little bit. No. I've got to cut. Another kind of thread or current throughout the whole animal sacrifice discussion is, what's the blood for? What does it do? And ultimately, why would we consume something like that? And why did certain people want the poor, the everybody, to eat flesh that had been sacrificed in especially brutal ways? Well, adrenochrome is a real thing. A chemical compound produced by the oxidation of adrenaline. It was the subject of limited research from the 1950s through to the 1970s as a potential cause of schizophrenia. While adrenochrome has no current proven medical application, the blah, 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 adrenochrome is mass-produced and commercially available to the public. Wait, what? Adrenochrome is mass-produced and commercially available to the public and is not a controlled substance. Well, that kind of begs the question, if it does it only come from humans? Because I think this is a big misconception, is people, all these conspiracy theorists love to talk about adrenochrome, but they stop right when you get to animal adrenochrome. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to double check here so I don't make an idiot of myself. But do other mammals have adrenaline?
I already got it pulled up.
Okay, well, please, by all means.
Yeah. So
the answer is yes. By the
the
way,
answer is yes. Yeah, but I can read a couple things off here. So number one, I'm so glad you pulled that up, because essentially all adrenochrome is a word that's thrown around a lot in like truther communities. I think people don't understand. It's just literally oxygenated adrenaline. So that means adrenaline that's been exposed from out of the veins to the air, oxygen, and that's how this substance is created. So really all that needs to be present to create it is just adrenaline in the bloodstream, and for the blood to be exiting the flesh or the body.
right.
So yeah, so here we have, I'll just read off a couple of studies just to get really scientific about it. A review by E.M. Claudia Terlau colleagues states that stress induces behavioral and physiological changes, including the secretions of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline within animals. So that's a research paper by E.M. Claudia Terlau you can look up. Another paper mentions particularly it talks about variations in meat quality based on the amount of adrenaline that's released during the killing.
Hunters know this to be true. Hunters will kill animals certain ways to avoid a full adrenaline dump. That's really what you want to avoid. Now, Cam was kind of talking about kosher slaughter earlier. That, depending on how you look at it, or I guess I'm no expert, but I would imagine that would be a full adrenaline dump, where the animal is being bled till its last moment of consciousness. The blood's draining out. The animal's tied, no anesthetic, no drugs being used. That's the conventional, traditional kosher way, correct?
Yeah.
That's as barbaric as it gets. Talk about Pizzagate, talk about this and that, but people, if it happens to animals, how can we just make it a human issue, right? You're eating things like this, you're consuming this, we're supporting it with our money. It's terrible. And just people, adrenochrome's not a human thing. It is an animal thing as well. Adrenaline is present in all mammals, if I'm not mistaken, most mammals for sure.
Yeah.
And they all feel the same terror that you feel when you think you're going to die. And demons love that. They love the taste of it, it seems.
Even in the word cannibal, you've got Canaan, Baal, right?
Yeah.
And I know this has been drawn and a conclusion that's been drawn because there's a lot of theory and discussion about actual cannibal sacrifice in the land of Canaan, which, if anyone isn't aware, that's the name of Israel before the tribes came after the Exodus with Moses and everything, right? And they come in and there's all this sacrifice and they intermingle with it and everything. But bottom line is they were doing a lot of animal sacrifice too, probably a lot more animal sacrifice than even child sacrifice. In fact, animal sacrifice is a progression towards child sacrifice. So there's an argument to be made that Canaan Baal worship or cannibalism is actually rooted in animal sacrifice.
All of the Freemasons in the South rebranded themselves as the Knights of the Golden Circle. Surprisingly, this thing led me down one of the darkest, deepest gopher holes I've ever seen, having to do with the fast food conspiracy. Now, a lot of people have talked about there potentially being human DNA in fast food. You know, people joke about it. There's memes, there's this and that. What's crazy, though, is how many of these organizations got started, like Wendy's, KFC, McDonald's, Taco Bell. Okay. The fast food industry was created by the remnants of the KGC. It's the continuation of the same goals. So what is the KGC? The Knights of the Golden Circle. Like I said, they're the Confederate Freemasons. They wanted to create a slave empire that went from the southern United States all the way down to South America. They were going to take everything they could get. Well, then eventually they turn into the KKK. Not many people know what KKK stands for. Ku Klux Klan means the Circle Clan. They're the Knights of the Circle Clan. It's the same golden circle. Go look into it, folks. Okay, look at the Freemasonic influence on the KKK. They're not a Christian organization. They might masquerade as one. Would you believe me if I told you KFC was inspired by KGC? KFC is KGC. When they sell grilled chicken, they print KGC on their drinks, on their boxes, on their plates and stuff. There was even a rumor, huge rumor, that Snopes has to debunk all the stuff that Colonel Sanders was in the KKK, that he donated tons of money to the KKK, or that his chicken was designed by the KKK to harm people or to, sterilize them or worse, right?
That whole idea of soul food in general in the South is literally slave food. The soul food that we know, like, chitlins and pig feet and like all these stews and different kind of it's all the remnant meats and parts of animals and everything. And the reason why is because it was like the shards and the leftover nasty bits of all the most unclean animals and everything were fed, as slave food. And then it became almost like its own kind of delicacy that was then venerated to this status of like soul food, when the reality is heavily melanated peoples across the board around the world typically eat really high, if not fully plant-based diets naturally. So it's like a complete inversion of their natural, historical diet.
Carl's Jr. started with a $311 investment. $311. They still put that on their Wikipedia today. 311. 311. Oh yeah, guys, that's at the heart of our business is we started with 311. Nonsense. Why wouldn't you just round it to 300 or 350, It's 311. K is the 11th letter. K. 311s. It's also 33.
Right.
And you can go on and on and on with all the fast food places. What are some other ones? Sonic, Masonic, Masonic, Sonic, I mean, it's literally all of them. White Castle. The Knights of the Golden Circle didn't have lodges. They had castles. And you had to be, you had to be white to get in pretty much. White Castle. You name it, we can tie all these fast food places back to this KGC hidden agenda. And also, just big picture, fast food chains are chains. They are the chains, But okay. Yeah.
It's almost like there's even something to like I know it's called fast food because of you get it quick, but there's something so ironic about, in scripture and all these ancient traditions, fasting was not eating and abstaining, either from certain foods like the gluttonous foods or fully from food, period, in just water fasting. But they've made it this fast idea associated with eating the most like hedonistic garbage that you could eat. This is talking about what the Nephilim, the fallen angels, did. And they began to injure birds and beasts, reptiles and fishes, all the animals that we were meant to have dominion over. But then in dominion, in the original Genesis narrative, in the creation story, after we have dominion, we're prescribed a plant-based diet, because true original dominion always meant service and stewardship to the animals, in helping them thrive and learning from them, because they have the same ruach and we can learn about God's spirit through them. But these fallen angels began to injure birds, like the word sin. They began to sin or injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes, to eat their flesh one after the other and drink their blood. Okay? So for years, this passage of Enoch has been believed to mean that the Nephilim, or the fallen angels, were eating each other, like they were cannibalizing each other. Literally in the book of Enoch, it says that they began to eat animals and drink their blood, and that this was then passed on to humankind. It says in this Hebrew Enochian tradition that the fallen angels taught all of this, like warfare, how to build weapons, how to kill and consume animals in their blood, and also how to wear makeup. What it's more likely talking about with the makeup is what is being referred to here with the clowns, because there's this idea of a reflection in wearing the clown makeup to embody the spirit of the demon.
Paul's general kind of theory is that clowns are demons, or at least are depictions depicting demons, acting out demonic influence. They're kind of radio antennas for demonic influence, Nephilim influence.
When they wear the makeup, it helps them embody and mirror and channel the essence or the spirit of that. And then finally, to your point about how it all comes together with this sacrificial ritual system that Jesus and the Nazarenes were turning the tables on in the temple cleanse, it's because the pure way didn't have animal sacrifice. For the Most High God didn't call for that, but the religion was infiltrated by these cults, these mystery blood cults that were established. And what these cults are doing with their temple sacrificial worship is almost always collective communal mind control. That's the real goal. It's how to keep your population subservient to the Lord. The word Lord, really goes back to the master or the ruler or the king who has control over all the resources. But really, that Lord is a channel for the lowercase g God, which is really one of these, demonic Nephilim archons, or another word. So if it's literal, that's how it works literally. If it's metaphorical, even, or maybe it's both, the idea is that this temple animal sacrificial worship with all the bloodletting raises the adrenaline, the psychosis, the schizophrenia, the ability to be malleable in these societies. And notice, in Greek culture and in all cultures, it was always right before battle, massive amounts of animal sacrificed, or right after battle in celebration, or sometimes both. So animal sacrifice is really, really, really tied to war and gearing people up for war. Why? Because you get the adrenaline pumping, you get the aggression up, and tying this all again back to the modern day, people who have heard of MK Ultra programs and everything, it's not a conspiracy. There's Wikipedia pages about it as well. It was a real thing that actually happened, where subjects were tested for different mind control techniques. And one of them was they were attempting to create super soldiers. They were trying to get see if they could program humans from a young age. There's actually movies about this too. There was a movie about, I think it was called Super Soldier or something. I can't remember that came out, but bottom line, they were trying to train out the empathy from people to be able to make like programmable super soldiers out of them. And they say a lot of assassins and people go through some of these same programs, but there's all kinds of testimonies from subjects from these tests where one of the first things they had to do was sacrifice an animal. And typically it was like a cat or like an animal that they actually could have a relationship with first while they were young. And why? In the documents, it says when they sacrifice the animal, that is a mechanism for creating an altar. Okay. Just like the altar in the temple.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the altar represents an alternate personality or a fragmentation in the human psyche where certain scents, smells, colors, symbols can activate that dormant, fragmented part of the consciousness. And so there's this idea that in ancient times, these animal sacrificial rituals were actually programming people for war to be able to go turn off their empathy and conquer their neighbor when otherwise they probably wouldn't. So it goes really, really deep, these types of things. So, you know, in a lot of ways, and two, anthropologically, we can prove that animal sacrifice leads to war and leads to slavery, which is what you were tying the, you know, nuts up with the KF or KGC stuff and everything. There's, again, Germs, Guns, and Steel, which is a Nobel Prize winning book, discusses this, that ancient societies, when they moved from nomadic or even just plant-based agriculture to then crossing the line into animal domestication and animal farming, there's always a shift that happens in every indigenous culture where, because they start animal farming, animals consume all of the resources.
Yeah.
So there's an endless abundance or amount of fruit and grain and plant-based foods that you can grow on very minimal resources. But once you get livestock, like if you've ever put a goat in a yard, it will eat your entire yard, just one goat.
Yeah.
So when you get an entire flock or herd of livestock, it destroys your reserves and your resources. And you get to a point as a tribal society where all your resources in your little area are gone, and now you got to go get resources from somewhere else. And now you become a pastoral nomadic herding, and you got to go to your neighbor, and they've got the resources. So now you have the advent of war. So I've got to now go fight my neighbor and get his resources. Well, conveniently, when you've learned to domesticate animals, you've also learned to forcibly impregnate them, forcibly kill them, when they maybe before that point were more like your brother and sister in a anthropological kind of indigenous sense, like totem animals and all of this. Now they're a being that you can slay and kill. Mm-hmm. You've practiced enslaving them because you monitor and do everything right. So by the time you get to the point of actually having to go get the resource from your neighboring tribe, you've already practiced war. You've built tools that help you subjugate the animals. You turn those tools like spears for hunting or the plow, these different things. There's actually a famous prophecy in the scripture: they shall beat their swords into plowshares, which is a prophecy about the return of the Edenic ideal where weapons are turned back into plant-based agricultural tools. But the tools are used for hurting animals, are then used to hurt humans, take them as plunder, take all their resources, and the women and children that are left over after the males of the neighboring tribe are killed, they become slaves. Women and children are the first slaves because, you know, it's harder to keep a male as a slave, but females are easier. And so all of this is practiced on the animals first. So it makes sense anthropologically too, even if you don't buy or believe all the Enoch and all of this, it makes sense anthropologically as well.
Yeah, great points. And what you were talking about a little bit earlier about, and it's kind of, we've brought it up a couple times, but the necessity of war when we kind of overinvest in animal husbandry, right? It kind of results in territorial disputes.
Animal husbandry.
Yeah.
Just listen to that terminology. If
Yeah.
that's not bestiality, then I don't know what is. People freak out about bestiality,
Yeah.
but you forget that animal husbandry is a term for the process in which, you know, I'm not going to get too graphic, but there is a human to animal relationship that is required to get the semen from the bull.
Yeah.
And then get the semen from the bull into the female to produce the herd, and it's not natural. It's human and animal.
Yeah.
You know, so anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, you're also talking about Pythagoras being a vegetarian, and that's correct. Pythagoras was a vegetarian. Plato was a vegetarian. Socrates, who came before Plato. Aristotle was vegetarian for a little. He went back on vegetarian. He rejected it when he split off from Plato.
Yeah.
And some actually point to Aristotle as the grandfather of materialism. Not Descartes, you know, but way back before, going to Aristotle, who rejected the perfect ideals that went along with Plato's vegetarian mystery school. When Aristotle's kicked out or singled out because Plato, you know, was disappointed or whatever it was that kind of broke them up a little bit, Aristotle renounces vegetarianism, and we essentially get matter-based, sense-based reality from him. He's the world's most famous materialist, many people would say. He set the stage for what would become nihilism, materialism, science. Everything is scientific. And, you know, we need to, I'm going to determine this because I'm God. My ears, my nose, my mouth, I'm God. I'm going to figure it out. My hypotheses, all that. A lot of that has its origins in Aristotle. And Nikola... Well, hang on one sec. Nikola Tesla also... Well, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just on that one note, to branch it into the religious side, is Thomas Aquinas, the great philosopher of Catholicism, right? That really revolutionized Catholicism into really a lot of the ideals that it has today. Thomas Aquinas, half of his ideas are Aristotle's. Like, he based he pulled us into this realm of like animals don't have souls and yada, 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 and all these things, like rejected all these earlier ideas of the Catholic Church and reformed them into this, you know, in terms of the animal question, you know. But go ahead. You're saying Tesla. You were going to list off maybe some more heady veggies.
Sponsoreando este desastre está detrás el culto oculto. Acá no hay plot twist, terribles turbios, o el terreno no está tan estático.
So, personally, I may go the route of raw carnivore to see spiritually how that affects me, and I may go completely like a stint of vegetarianism or veganism to see how it affects my spirit and body. Just to be honest,
you should save yourself some trouble and just not do the carnivore thing. I'll save you some trouble.
Yeah, that might be good.
I'll say two quick things on that. Thanks for calling in, man. I really
thanks. Thanks, JT. I'll let Cam respond to you, but thanks, JT. Have a good night.
Yeah, appreciate all your work, man. Your channel rocks. And then I'll look into your channel, Cam.
Thank you,
for sure, man. Thank you so much for sharing and being so honest and vulnerable. I'll say to your point, you know, I usually argue these things in terms of carnivore versus vegan or whatever as outside of even the realm of diet, because, you know, again, you pointed to Genesis with Adam and these ancient concepts, like animals aren't even food in those paradigms. So it's not even about diet. It becomes more a question about ethics and like the right and wrong of killing versus not killing, etc. But talking in the realm of diet, I will jump on Connor's team there for a second and say to, you know, if we can, you don't have to listen, but to save you the trouble, you know, the main carnivores, Carnivore MD, he's one of the biggest out there. He showed his blood work after doing carnivore and it was completely tanked. And he had to stop doing carnivore. Now he incorporates fruits and other foods in his diet. Liver King, who's his partner in his supplement business, is completely spiraling right now. I don't know if you've seen all that. Word on the street is he's got like really serious health conditions going on, but he's not talking about it because it would hurt the business and everything. So just bottom line, there's carnivore. It's no doubt that you can get a short season. Again, we're just talking about health here, not talking about the ethics, but people report these like heightened senses of clarity and, you know, feeling better or whatever, but that's usually because they're cutting out processed food.
You've taken away everything, and by default you got rid of a bunch of artificial preservatives and stuff like that.
Someone in the chat just said Jordan Peterson and his daughter are good. I don't know if you've seen the news about Jordan Peterson, but
yeah,
bless him. You know, he shares a lot of good stuff, but he's going through his second or third really intense health crisis right now.
Yeah.
In the Matrix, you know, the whole thing is you got to unplug from it, right? And in the story of Daniel, to me, that's the ultimate Matrix story, because he's in Babylon. Babylon is traditionally, you know, like the Rastafarians, Bob Marley, their Matrix is Babylon. You know, they talk about the system, the beast system, right? What does Daniel do? Step one to unplug himself from Babylon, even though he is enslaved in it, is he rejects the flesh food and the wine too. And so I just wanted to challenge JT that the ultimate red pill and truther thing you could ever do to really experiment and go down the path against the beast system is to reject the blood sacrifice stuff
and flesh diet in general. Bloodlessness, right? Bloodlessness is the spirit of Christianity, true Christianity, I think.
And, you know, talking about the Garden of Eden being here in Amaruca, which, guys, that is what the name America comes from. It comes from Amaruca, the land of the feathered serpent. And if you do not know the story yet of Quetzalcoatl, I encourage and implore and empower all of you to look up this story, the story of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who also rejected not only human sacrifice, but animal sacrifice, which is why he led his people north out of the Aztec and Mayan cultures. And then he was actually literally crucified on a cross here in Tucson, Arizona. And, you know, so many of these stories sound so similar to the story of what we've been told as. Go ahead, brother.
Hey, Chief, sorry to interrupt, but
please,
go ahead.
I
love that you went from Knights of the Golden Circle to Quetzalcoatl in like a matter of 7 seconds. Because what's one of the alternative names of Quetzalcoatl, or his
Kukulkan?
Kukulkan.
Yeah.
Ooh,
brother. Yeah. Okay.
Ku Klux Klan. Who knows?
Yeah, and see, this is the thing. Is you know, there's different sects, right? And these different sects would say that Kukulkan promoted animal sacrifice or even human sacrifice, right? But Quetzalcoatl did not.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that reflects poorly on Kukulkan. I actually see it as the KKK kind of picking a dragon that they like, you know, or they see him as another dragon, right? The grand dragon of the KKK. They see that as kind of the same energy. I'm not saying they have the best understanding of Kukulkan or anything, but go ahead.
Of course. And thank you, you know, for referencing that as well. And guys, it's bringing me back to my point of what I was really ultimately getting to is, you know, so many of these stories are really talking about the messenger of God, Hermes. And, you know, and when we're looking at how to properly read the Bible, many biblical scholars will point to the word hermeneutics, right? And when you're looking at this word hermeneutics, it's basically breaking down the grade level of how you're going to interpret the Bible. Well, the root word of this word hermeneutics is Hermes, the messenger of God. And so, you know, we really want to pay attention to these things, and we want to pay attention to the astrological references. We want to pay attention to the hermetic references. We want to pay attention to the allegorical references. And, you know, that's really what I choose to subscribe to. This is why my ancestors here had crosses way before Columbus ever showed up. Why? Because what they were doing is they were observing the sun dying and resurrecting on the cross of solstices and equinoxes. That's what they were doing. And they were paying homage to that Son of God dying and resurrecting on the cross of the solstices and equinoxes. And, you know, when we were when the Bible is talking about the bull sacrifice or the bull worship, that's because we were in the age of Taurus. When there was
Mm.
lamb sacrifice or ram sacrifice, it was the age of Aries.
Right.
You know, and you mentioned before earlier about, you know, Jesus being the beginning of the age of Pisces, but he also said, follow the man with the pitcher of water into the house in which he goes, as we are now entering that age of Aquarius. And
Yeah.
you know, we're having this Saturn retrograde with Neptune retrograde conjunct in Pisces, and I'm so grateful for you guys doing this show right now, because it's providing so much clarity to the end of this age of Pisces, so that we have the proper perspective of what this prophet was really trying to teach, which is a lifestyle of how to lead people, and, you know, to reject animal sacrifice, reject human sacrifice, reject blood sacrifice, reject living off of adrenochrome, reject all of these things. And that's why the animals were led out of the temple. But
Yeah.
understand this as well, guys. Understand that the temple, God does not dwell in temples built by man's hands. The
Right.
kingdom of heaven is within, and ye are gods. So
Totally.
I'm not saying that, you know, we're all going to I'm not to the demigod subscription and all of these things, but I'm encouraging you to open your mind outside of these religious shackles and recognize that astrology is right there in Genesis 1:14. God
Yeah.
made the sun, moon, and the stars for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And you want
Yeah.
to pay attention to those signs. And then he asked Job, canst thou call henceforth the Mazzaroth? What's the Mazzaroth?
Totally.
Mazzaroth is zodiac. So if
Yeah.
you don't know the zodiac, you can't say that you truly understand this book. The three magi, guys, they knew what the Star of Bethlehem was, which was a Jupiter-Venus
Yeah.
conjunction.
Well, here, I hate to slow you down, but
Go
I
ahead,
got to
brother.
get the next caller in. They've been
Sure.
real patient. Chief Chacon, guys, I threw his YouTube up there a couple minutes ago. Give him a subscribe. He does some good stuff with Santos Bonacci here and there, I see. And Chief Chacon, thanks for calling, man.
Longo, one more thing, brother. One more thing. I would love to do a show, the four of us, with Santos.
Okay, anytime. I'd love to. I'm
Let's
down.
do it, brother. Thank you so
Hit-
much for having me on, guys. Appreciate you.
You
Peace,
as
brother.
well. Peace. All right, we'll speed run.
My question is, most of us vegans feel a deep heartbreak when we realize, you know, all the harm that we've done to the animals. And from a Christian perspective, what's your take on how we can begin to forgive ourselves for that harm? I know I'll always feel that guilt, and, you know, that's justified, but beyond trying to repair through our advocacy, do you have any thoughts on how we can carry that guilt in a healthy way, and
Yeah.
spiritually healthy way?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Yep.
Have you ever shot an animal in the face?
Nope. No, I have not.
You're good.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Move on. You're done. You're done.
Yeah.
You don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. You're good. Some of us have, and we're dealing with that also. So you're
Yeah.
you're far ahead of the people who have their hands a bit bloodier than you. I would say everything you did up until you knew better can be easily excused. As soon as you know better, you have a responsibility to do better. And even most meat eaters who've heard of vegetarianism a little bit or seen some slaughterhouse footage, they really don't even know. I think you actually need to be vegetarian a little bit for you to feel that, right? For you to feel that kind of conscience,
Right.
that surge of, now I'm not doing it anymore, so I can process the feeling. So I commend you for feeling that. Okay. Only the good feel guilt. That's what some people say. But I wouldn't. I know you're trying to speak for many people out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. But you personally, I would say just cast it off as best as you can. All the years you were doing what your parents were feeding you, you were doing what the TV was telling you, the school was telling you was the normal diet, the food pyramid and all this. And we were succumbing to that. Don't sweat it. Really don't sweat it. And for anyone else out there, I would say, what else can you do but eat fruits and vegetables and just
Right.
kind of talk to God about it, you know? Talk to God. Speak to your benevolent creator out loud. Tell him your pains, your worries, your stresses, and you will be granted the God's peace. God's peace, the stillness of mind that only Christians seem to walk around with all the time, right? You've
Right.
given God all your worries and your burdens, and I think that might help. But
Thank you for that. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
that was
Cam.
Really,
that was
really
beautiful,
sense.
Doc. I can only add to that. I'm in agreement with that, and I can only add, again, taking from the words of Jesus, he says, "You are forgiven at the measure at which you forgive others." So taking that feeling that you have and understanding that those around you could maybe carry the same thing when it comes to reaching out and talking to others about this topic, where they maybe are or aren't at your level yet. The measure of the forgiveness that you carry is an open door towards, I mean, we still got to hold people accountable, don't get me
Right.
wrong, but keeping that spirit and that essence, I think circles its way back to you in the way that you carry the weight of that on your shoulders, and then use that as fuel to, just get active. Because what I always say when it comes to not eating animal products is that's like really just like basic line first step, like humanity. It's not like something to feel righteous about, or people always try to come and say that someone who chooses this, that vegans or vegetarians or whatever, they're self-righteous, blah blah blah, but really it's just like a baseline. It's just not doing something that's harmful, right? You don't say that someone who doesn't like kidnap children are righteous. So I think what you could do then is really move into you're not consuming animals, but what are you doing for the animals? And that can be everything from speaking out on these topics, to working and helping at sanctuaries, to using your creative skills to get the message out to, I mean, there's so many things that you can do to just further feel like you're adding and doing something to continue the message forward. And I think that always, in my own personal experience with having similar thoughts about what's been in the past, the more active I am, the less room there is for me to really weigh on that too much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I really appreciate both of your answers.
Hey, Doc, can I hit a couple of things I see in the chat really fast?
Yeah, we're about to wrap it up. I was going to let you go.
Yeah, it's cool. I just want to hit a couple. So one is they're joking. They're saying this is how the vegan cult pulls you in. What's funny about that is that's a whole example of the reverse level propaganda. We kind of touched on this before, but the word cult literally comes from blood ritual sacrifice. So the biblical scholarly term for the priestly class that instituted all the Levitical sacrificial laws and all of this, and even in the Greco-Roman sense, they are literally called the occult priesthood. It's that's where the origins of the occult is, the temple blood ritual system.
Yeah.
The temple cult.
Also, Cam, I mean, we're missing a big phonetic link here.
Yeah.
When you sacrifice or slaughter animals, you are culling them. Animals which have been culled have been slaughtered or sacrificed. Culled. Cult.
Yeah.
CULLED. It's phonetically identical to cult. Cold.
There you go. There you go. So, like you said, the Soylent Green era, reverse propaganda. Bill Gates bought Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. That's a whole psyop thing. Bill Gates's favorite food is a beef hamburger. He's said it across the board on multiple interviews. He's not here. Bill Gates is someone who is hedging his bets on playing the system, winning, on levels of monetary gain, but also some occult level.
Tell me, it's like this, just real quick. It's like if you had all of the chemtrailers started pushing for clean air initiatives, and then they call clean air initiatives agenda psyop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, of course, the people who are making the problem are going to go invest in part of the solution and try and hijack the solution.
Right.
That's not unique to food or vegetarianism. You'd say the same thing about vaccine manufacturers started
Right.
promoting, some holistic alternative, everyone would turn on that holistic alternative and say, oh, they're pushing this. You got to be careful of the association bias or the association fallacy, right? That
Right.
because this thing is pushed by someone, it must be exclusive to their agenda.
Right.
No.
And the fact of the matter is, on the Bill Gates thing, is that he's actually just bought like almost all the farmland, including like
Yeah.
vegetable-based crops. And so he's doing that too. But
Yeah.
then the bigger point on even that is that most of those vegetable-based crops are fed to the animals we eat. So
Right.
he's hedging his bets on the animal agricultural system big time. It's like his Beyond Meat stocks or whatever it was, like that's chump change compared to how much money he has in animal-based agriculture and vaccines.
Totally.
There was
And
one other, or go ahead.
I was also just going to say that, it is kind of true that the most processed vegan alternatives, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole unless I'm starving on a road trip or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to eat vegan meat just because you choose to stop eating animal flesh. No one's going to prevent you from eating spinach, grains, beans, nuts, you name it. Olive
Right.
oil, fruits, grapes, all rich, decadent. If you want to go decadent, you can be decadent and indulgent if you want. No one's stopping you from eating bags of French fries or pizza or whatever you want. You don't have to eat the bugs. You don't have to eat the this and that. And notice the terminology they use. The plant-based is industrial plant-based. It's the factory plant-based.
Right.
Plant-based is not Genesis 1:29 philosopher's diet. Okay. Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras weren't eating Impossible Burgers. They're eating beans, nuts, local organic foods.
Right. Totally. There was one other
and I just got to say it. If you think that equals that, if you think that because sometimes they're talking about reducing cattle consumption to reduce emissions and things like that, you're reaching so far. You're reaching so hard. Flesh is the way of the land. Flesh is the way of the world. It is what's normalized, promoted. Vegans and vegetarians are always marginalized. Okay. Even in this whole climate change agenda, Palestine, you name it, whatever freakist leftoid gets to the top of the pyramid by shouting the loudest, vegetarianism is never in that conversation. It's always tucked away to the side. It might be used as a slandering term like soy boy, but vegetarianism never takes the main stage like climate change, this or that,
Right.
And if you really fall for that, you're pretty stupid. You're pretty stupid. If you really think, GMO soy burgers is the same thing as spinach, olive oil, good old organic vegetarian food. You're just dumb if you can't see past that.
Yeah, and someone brought this up earlier that one of the callers said something about money for subsidies or something, or they were like alluding to it. And that's a big point on this too, is that, the plant-based alternatives, I think there's room to innovate and get, have some fun with what we're able to create with plant-based alternatives, but we do want it to be pure and we want it to be like as holistic as possible. And the reality is that almost all of our government spending for agriculture goes to subsidize the animal agriculture industry because it's at such a deficit. There's literally caverns underground full of government cheese. Literally, like it's the funny phrase. There's literally cheese stored underground from all this government money that's just sitting there rotting more than it already is, because of how much money the lobbyists pump in to bolster the animal agriculture. It's billions and billions of dollars every year to millions, like a couple, like it's astronomically different, the plant-based subsidies versus the animal base. So there's no room to really innovate because these industries don't have the funds to. So we do need to innovate though, and we need more demand. That's why we need to get the demand up and the voting buying power up, I guess, in that way. So
No aceptar participar es más extremo que el antropoceno. Boicoteo al infernos. Nada nuevo bajo el soul. Esto tiene tradición. Cortisol y adrenochrome. Argumentos paleolíticos, moral neandertal. Me desligo del circo de sacrificio diabólico, demoníaco con carpa, luciferino Loki. Estilo y edito licidio, les conspiro ecualizando niveles para que eleves el level. Yo, this is old school, it's not new age. This is old school, it's not new age.
That idea from.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing, Brady Crow. I hate to cut you off.
No, you're
but
fine.
You know what the thing about Jesus is? He's a spotless mirror. He's the cleanest mirror there's ever been.
And closed on Sunday. Shout out Kanye.